Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Her Faith Inspires podcast, where we take cultural issues and we tackle them with biblical truth. I have a listener requested episode for you today that has to do with a response to a New Agers email about Christians finding Jesus and leaving the New Age. Before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you of the online conference called Mamas Against the Mainstream Media. Now, that conference drops today, goes live today on the same day that this podcast episode goes out. And I will be speaking along with 24 other women. It's free and you can register at businessbygodsdesign.com/Shanda. If you are in the upstate of South Carolina, I am speaking at East Pickens Baptist Church on September 23rd. That is from 10 to 2 and it only costs $20 and includes a Chick-fil-A lunch. That is on my website in the event section, along with Mamas Against the Mainstream agenda. So you can go to shandafulbright.com/events to find all the details. Now, finally, I want to let you know about my Patreon group. Now, that group, us group of ladies, are getting ready to study Tactics Together by Greg Koukl. I've already read Tactics before, but we are actually doing the study guide together. And if you want to join us and then get behind the scenes information, newsletters, and to study all the stuff with us, go to Patreon/Shanda to get in for $5 a month. And really, I give discounts to my Patreon group on whatever I do. So you end up making your money back and it's only $5 a month. All right. So I have a copy of an email that was sent to a listener and it's titled, "So You Found Jesus" by Yolanda Norris Clark. I believe it is addressed to those, at least addressed about those who have left their New Age for Christianity. And this woman is offended by this. And instead of reading the entire email to you in one shot, I'm going to break it down by the claims that she makes and the points that she's trying to bring up in the email, and then give you the rebuttal to that. So this is how I broke it into parts, like 3 parts, and we're going to address it part by part. The first one is we're going to address her claims that Christianity is dogmatic. So is Christianity dogmatic? Are we only believing Jesus or believing in Jesus because belief structures are comforting? Secondly, how do Christians and the New Age define evil? Because she does talk about evil in her email. And thirdly, why isn't the New Age enough? Like, why can't you be a believer and still trust in these crystals and astrology and, go to these, these mediums and things like that? So let me first start by reading you the opening address of her email. This is sent to her followers, her subscriber list, in regard to those who leave New Age for Christianity. Now, just for a little bit of background, I did look her up on Instagram, and she is a midwife. So I think she believes in maybe holistic health and things like that, which there's nothing wrong with that. And midwifery, I know people who are midwives as well, and they do a great job. A lot of women want to have their babies at home. So you have a midwife, kind of like a birthing coach, to help you with that. But she's more New Age, but she does stake claims about believing in God. She has some claims about that. So let's go ahead and read these different parts and then talk about how would we as Christians give a response to these accusations and even claims that she's making. Okay. So a lot of times people say, well, how would you respond to that? What should I say? And the thing is that we do follow all different kinds of people. We are going to get their opinions. We're going to get their worldview and the things that they put out. But how do we guard ourselves against thinking that it is okay to mix New Age beliefs with Christianity, which is what she's basically saying. So you found Jesus, huh? And then she goes on to give a big explanation and accusations of, what she's thinking about Christians who do this. So here's what she says, and I quote, "I have seen many examples in my circles, especially over the past couple of years, of incredibly earnest, well-meaning individuals who have, quote unquote, found Jesus or God or Christianity. This often seems to happen in the context of a conversion to Christianity, and who have subsequently renounced astrology, tarot, crystals, yoga, Pilates, and other so-called New Age practices as the work of the devil. To my mind, this is an example of simply transferring one's desperation and externalization of authority from one unyielding doctrine to another. New Age credos, after all, can be just as fundamentalist as Christian ones. Okay, that's the end quote for now. So first, praise God that these people she's observed have left all of the practices of the New Age movement and found Jesus. Most of the time, Christians syncretize or combine lots of different worldviews with Christianity, and then Christians don't seem to understand what the foundational beliefs of Christianity are, and they don't see a problem with syncretism. We're going to discuss this more, but the New Age and Christianity, they don't mix. In the New Age, the universe is God. It is a highly emotional religion rooted in Eastern mysticism and bypasses the mind. So, of course, when people, quote unquote, find Jesus and become Christians, like, earnestly Christians, they leave the New Age. They're going to, because those two worldviews, those two religions, those belief systems conflict. Secondly, she says people who leave the New Age for Christianity are transferring their desperation and externalization of authority from one unyielding doctrine to another. So let me first address the desperation part before we move on. She's acknowledging the desperation of each individual. We are all broken people, no matter which religion we claim. We are all looking for fulfillment in something because, as Solomon said, God put eternity in man's heart. My question to her would be, if people are leaving the New Age for Christianity, they have realized that the New Age cannot fix their problem of desperation. So why are you upset? So let's keep reading a little more before we define some things that need defining. I want to say now, before I keep reading, that she does annoy me with the way that she communicates things. She almost intentionally tries to make them sound more complex without speaking frankly. And I honestly don't like it when people do that. Like, you're going to see what I mean, hopefully, as I read you some of the rest of her email. But I'm kind of like, why are you using those words? And one of the words isn't a word. I'm like, that's not said correctly. And I feel like when people do this, they're trying to sound more intellectual than they are trying to communicate in a way that people understand. It's almost like, I heard Elisa Childers say before, trying to nail Jello to a wall. I'm kind of like, what are you trying to say? Like, just say it. Speak clearly, please. So anyways, let me keep reading and maybe you'll see what I mean. Quote, this is what she says. This trend reveals just how confused, insecure, and terrified so many people are in this time of ongoing racial winnowing and clarification. For the undifferentiated, undividuated, that's the part that's not a word, it's not undividuated, it's individuated person, adhering to rigid, dogmatic, isolating regulations and belief structures can feel very comforting, as is the sense of self-righteousness that allows them to feel as though they are somehow exceptional, that their quote unquote formula sets them apart or offers them some sort of special protection from evil, when in fact the only safeguard we have against corruption and the only true form of connection with God lies in the realm of self-responsibility and self-ownership. End quote. All right, there's a lot of stuff here. So let me try and address each thing so it makes sense. That's why it's also easier to read emails like this and then break things down like word by word, I guess you could say. Because if I was having a verbal conversation with someone, you'd have to address so many things in that one spewage of words. Now, maybe I'm not making sense with that, but it's like, where do I even begin? Okay. She makes a lot of accusations here about people who leave Christianity as being confused. She calls it a trend. I'm going to push back on that and say that Christianity is not a trend in our current 21st century culture, not because I think people are mean to Christians. It's because statistics show us that. In my recent podcast with Lori Morrow, we talked about how you have a decrease in Christianity from the early 2000s, like a steep decline. And then you have a rise of people who are saying, I don't want to be affiliated with any religion. However, in the book, So the Next Generation Will Know by Dr. Sean McDowell and J. Warner Wallace, they're saying it doesn't mean that people are less religious. People are actually more spiritual. Okay. So as far as Christianity being a trend, I don't see it. And statistics don't prove that. So that's why I would push back on that. She says people who become Christians are insecure, terrified even, and she blames it on racial winnowing, whatever that even means. Racial winnowing. Now, maybe some people leave Christianity. I don't even know. I really don't know. I'd have to ask her, what do you mean by that? Because she doesn't explain. It's just an accusation with absolutely no reasons or evidence to back up these claims. So I really want, when you examine what people are claiming and you examine what people say, fine, but are they giving any good reasons or evidence for it? That's why it's easy for me to push back on the Christianity is a trend part, because statistics just show us that the evidence is not there to support that. And she doesn't give any evidence to support why she believes that Christianity is a trend. It's not there. And so if you want to make a good claim, you better support it with reasons and evidence. Okay. Otherwise, people are going to be like, that's just not true, or you didn't back up your claim. She goes on to say that Christianity is rigid, dogmatic, and has isolated regulations and belief structures. She's right. She's right about it being dogmatic. Regulations means rules, and we know that God has given us commands, which are arguable that they would be considered rules, because I don't think that they're the same as in the sense of rules. Oh, you broke the rule, you're out of here. You have to talk about the, salvation and grace and things like that. But we'll just say, okay, for the sake of argument, rules, maybe she means commands. So I'll give her that, since regulations and commands are kind of like similes. But is Christianity the only religion that's dogmatic? Is it the only religion with regulations? This is what I find funny. I've been accused of being called dogmatic before. People have said, "Oh, you're so dogmatic about your beliefs." And I said, "Well, you're on my Instagram feed calling me dogmatic. I would say you're dogmatic about your beliefs." So we really need to define the word dogmatic, right? Again, is Christianity the only religion that's dogmatic? Christianity isn't the only religion that's dogmatic. It baffles me when people accuse Christians of being dogmatic as if they're not dogmatic about what they believe. So dogmatic means to lay down principles as incontrovertibly true. So I'd say she sounds pretty dogmatic about the New Age and those who leave it for Christianity. So I'm reading right now, I'm taking Dr. Nancy Pearcey's philosophy class, the philosophy of C.S. Lewis, and we have to read God in the Docks by C.S. Lewis. It's a bunch of his essays. And he said this in one of his essays called Religion Without Dogma, ? If there is no dogma, there is nothing to believe. For the Jew, he delights himself in God's laws. For the Buddhist, he believes in the doctrine of immortality. In the New Age, all is God. We are all God. So if someone accuses you, Christian, of being dogmatic, then ask them what they're dogmatic about, because religion without dogma is impossible. What they really want is religious relativism, as if all beliefs are created equal, that all religions have equal value. They want minimal religion so that they all blend in together and they're all the same and everyone can be happy and tolerant of each other's beliefs. But it's not possible, because C.S. Lewis goes on to say the minimal religion, in fact, cannot, while it remains minimal, be acted on, because as soon as you act on it, you have assumed one of the dogmas, one of the belief systems. So she accuses Christianity of being rigid, and rigid means not flexible. Again, what does she mean by that when she says it? If she means we can't compromise God's commands, she's correct. If she means we do not sway from the fundamentals of our faith, the doctrines of Christianity, she's correct. If she means we will not mix New Age and Christianity, she's correct. The problem with the American church, like I said before, is syncretism. And I mentioned this on my podcast about worldviews when we talked about George Barna's American Worldview Inventory. Syncretism is the mushing together of many different belief systems. I say it's like going to a buffet and you're just like, I'll take a little bit of this, I'll take a little bit of New Age, I'll take a little bit of Christianity. So, to make sure I secure my way into heaven, et cetera, et cetera. So the mushing together of many different belief systems and not sticking to the fundamentals of Christianity. And that is what the American Worldview Inventory of 2021, 2022 reveals. So if she's upset that the people who find Jesus leave the New Age because they don't want to mix their Christianity and their New Age, she doesn't understand Christianity. She doesn't. The core principles of Christianity cannot be compromised, or you're not Christian. That's what part of that American Worldview Inventory, when Barna goes out and he finds these statistics, there's a slew of questions that are asked to these people to see if they have a biblical worldview or not. And many of them are the fundamentals of Christianity. So here are just a few of the fundamentals of Christianity: the Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Jesus being a sinless and perfect sacrifice who died for the sins of humanity. That Jesus rose on the third day, and that we are saved by grace through faith. Every Christian denomination adheres to these core doctrines and cannot waver from them, or they're not Christian. So doctrine is what sets religions apart from one another. If not, there is no difference between this religion or that religion. The New Age is a religion with doctrines. They believe the universe is God. They believe they can communicate with the kingdom of darkness through mediums. They believe you can achieve enlightenment, that the universe will give back to you in positive energy. And she says the only safeguard that we have against corruption and the only connection we have with God lies in the realm of self-responsibility and self-ownership. Okay, so what does that, what does she mean by God first? Because in the New Age, all is God. So does she mean the God of the Bible? She can't mean the God of the Bible, because the only way to connect with God is through Jesus Christ. You can't connect with God. The only way to connect with him is in self-responsibility and self-ownership. Taking on the responsibility of what? You can't take on the responsibility of your sin. Adam and Eve tried that in Genesis chapter 3. They sewed fig leaves together, covered themselves, and still they hid from God when he came looking for them, showing that the shame was not covered up. They did not take away their shame. So if you're going to tell me that self-ownership and self-responsibility will be your connection to God, you definitely don't understand the gospel message. Because Jesus Christ said, let me go ahead and take that shame away from you, so where you can once again be in the presence of God. Because Jesus said, no one comes to the Father but by me. Anyone who tries to come in any other way, the same as a thief and a robber. So Jesus is saying, in order for you to be connected to God the Father, you got to go through me. And she's saying, oh, no. You can go ahead and be responsible for yourself and take self-ownership. Guess what? You have a connection with God. That's why Christians who leave the New Age cannot stick around, or Christians who find Jesus. If you find Jesus and become a Christian, you can't stick around with the New Age and sync those practices together. They're in conflict with each other. The New Age is all about the self, but if the self is the problem, how can the self solve that problem? It can't. And she accuses the Christian of being self-righteous. Oh, you're so self-righteous because you think that this way is the best way, the only way. Yet she says the way to connect with God is to get, through this self-responsibility and self-ownership. That sounds very self-righteous to me. You can solve your own problems. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's funny how people who accuse Christians of something, in essence, they're doing the exact thing they're accusing others of. So let's look at the other part of her email. How do Christians and the New Age define and deal with the problem of evil? So notice here that she talks about evil. The word evil is in her email. The thing is, every worldview must answer for the problem of evil. Every worldview has to identify it, and when it does, it comes up with a solution. The question is, does it work, and does it align to reality? So Yolanda says, evil is real. Satanism, and she puts in parentheses, the inversion of holiness, is very real. So I agree so far that evil is real, although I'd be more specific and say that Satan, which means adversary, is a real being created by God. So I don't know that she believes that he is an actual being. So let's keep reading what she wrote. Dark energy can be and often is invoked and spread with what we can all fool ourselves into believing are the best intentions, and even in the name of Jesus. or under the banner of church or of some other seemingly virtuous organization or religion. So again, I'll be honest, I'm not sure what she means here. To invoke something is to cite it or appeal to it as an authority. So is she saying we can spread dark energy through the best intentions, even by speaking Jesus's name, or through our church organization? I'm not sure what she's saying here, because again, she makes accusations, but then does not support any of her claims at all. She goes on to say, I'm sure too that yoga, like anything else, can be used to perpetuate false light and contorted perspectives, though my observation is that most people who practice yoga do so either with genuinely positive spiritual intentions or without much spiritual intention at all, and as a way of supporting physical health. All right, so that's her end quote. I do agree with her about like the yoga thing. There are so many debates about yoga from Christians and the origins of yoga. There are many Christians who are like, nope, yoga is wrong. And then there are some Christians who do yoga poses for physical fitness, and that's it. They probably have no idea what that yoga pose is called. They are not thinking anything with New Age. So yoga is a New Age practice, and there are many yoga studios that do the whole meditation and mindless stuff and all that goes along with the New Age and yoga. I personally am of the mind that it depends on what you're doing yoga for, a stretch or spiritual practice. She does use words like quote unquote false light and positive spiritual intention. So she knows that there's something deeper to yoga than the person who's just using it for a stretch. And that's completely New Age. It's a New Age practice and a New Age belief, and Christians should not practice yoga for any sort of spiritual result or quote unquote light. This again is where she's digging at Christians for not practicing yoga. Okay. So that's where she and I split off. Am I saying that if you practice yoga for the stretches, that it's not a sin? I'm saying, conviction wise, I would say if you're not practicing yoga and you're not going to a yoga studio where it's like clear your mind and meditate and all this stuff, then you probably don't even know what, any of those poses mean or what they do. Some people say, well, I don't care. I think that still opens up a door. Again, take that up with the Lord, because I'm not going to sit here and accuse people who do a yoga stretch or a downward dog to stretch out their back as practicing a New Age practice. I'm not going to take it that far. But again, you guys have to realize, what are the intentions behind this? What am I doing it for? And so she goes on to say, quote, yet yoga, in my view, is no more inherently demonic than any other practice, spiritual or otherwise, nor are astrology, psychic readings, nor an interest in crystals inherently satanic. Okay, so there it is. It's the whole kit and caboodle, the whole kitchen sink, the whole New Age enchilada. She just dropped it on us. She is as New Age as it comes, and she is saying that we Christians are classifying yoga, crystals, astrology, psychic readings as evil, and she doesn't like it. And we could easily usher in darkness with Jesus's name or our church denomination. Again, notice the claim, notice no evidence for it. Now, I am not going to defend her claims. I'm rebutting her claims. But if I was talking to her, I would ask her to prove it. I would ask her, what evidence do you have? How do you defend that claim? What do you mean by that? All of these things. And my question to her would be who is your authority? Notice that her terminology throughout this entire email is, in my view, through my observations, she's the authority. She does not cite any authoritative sources for her beliefs. And even if she did, she would cite a New Age source, which she ends up doing that here eventually. One. And if you disagree with her, you're the fanatic. She says this, quote, frankly, I find fanaticism from any direction incredibly tiresome, not to mention truly pitiful. I don't mean that as an insult. Yes, she does. She means that as an insult, but simply as an observation. Again, anecdotal evidence on her part, and not any sort of, source that goes beyond what she thinks. She says it is a sign of spiritual immaturity. Fanaticism and authoritarianism go hand in hand. Okay. So again, like if you're not watching YouTube right now, I'm scratching my head because I'm just like, oh my goodness, there's so much to say about it. She's accusing Christians who disagree with the New Age practices she is defending as being fanatics. Yet she's the one who wrote the email to her subscribers. And she's not, being fanatical about Christians who leave New Age and New Age practices. Come on. She is. She's being fanatical about Christians who leave New Age. She's upset about that. She is the one who is saying, I find it to be pitiful. And fanaticism is the same as authoritarianism. It goes hand in hand. Again, I'm just like, lady, look in the mirror. I find it pitiful that she doesn't see that she's being fanatical about New Age. And then she drops the real bomb. Fanaticism and authoritarianism go hand in hand. And authoritarianism is strict obedience to authority, especially that of the government, at the expense of personal freedom. So she's saying that Christians who don't practice the New Age practices that she loves is under Christian authoritarianism at the expense of our personal freedom. Let's line this up with what Jesus said about our lives. John 12:25 says, he who loves his life will lose it, and he who hates his life in this world will find it. That is, I guess, if you want to say, is that fanatical? Well, we're talking about living our lives for Christ and not living our lives for self. So again, we're going to see that we are in conflict with the New Age. John 8:36, he who the Son sets free is free indeed. Free from what? Free from the bondage of sin, free from slavery. So no, we're not enslaved under authoritarianism. We are actually set free. And Matthew 6:24 tells us no one can serve two masters. He will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. Meaning we're either devoted to Christ, or we're going to be devoted to, and New Age is mostly the self, but we can't be devoted to both. So yes, when we are devoted to Christ, but we are free from the bondage of sin and the burdens of this world because he has saved us from those things. We have put away the desires of the flesh and stopped serving the desires of the flesh to serve Christ. He becomes our authority. But no matter which way you slice it and dice it, she has an authority too. She has the authority of the self. I will do what I want and be my own God. And this is my observation. And this is the way that I believe about, the problem of evil. Well, okay, but you're going to say that just because you are the authority of yourself, then you're free. You're still going along with New Age practices. You're still trusting in those things, mediums and the powers of darkness and crystals and rocks and things like that. Okay, so we're going to define evil differently than she does. She says crystals and yoga and psychic readings, they're not inherently evil. Says who? Says who? What do you have? What source do you have other than yourself that backs up that claim? New Agers love to communicate with the darkness. God commands those who follow him not to practice such things. Again, we see a complete contrast in beliefs here. We see an ideological divide between Christianity and the New Age. God commands those who follow him, do not practice these things. We see examples of this in Acts and Old Testament commands not to entertain the spirits of darkness. And I thought Got Questions said it really well. They said, quote, the Bible strongly condemns spiritism, mediums, the occult, and psychics. Leviticus 20:27 says, a man or woman who is a medium or spiritist among you must be put to death. You are to stone them. Their blood will be on their own heads. Now, that's an Old Testament law. I don't believe that God wants us to continue with the Old Testament ways because Jesus has come and died, but it does condemn those things, right? The Bible is condemning those practices. Deuteronomy 18:10-13 says, there shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or his daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens or a sorcerer, horoscopes, tarot cards, astrology, fortune tellers, palm readings, and seances fall into this category as well. These practices are based on the concept that there are little g gods spirits or deceased loved ones that can give advice and guidance. These gods or spirits are demons. 2 Corinthians 11:14-15 says, and no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Notice with New Age, she's always talking about light. The Bible gives us no reason to believe that deceased loved ones can contact us. If they were believers, they are in heaven enjoying the most wonderful place imaginable in fellowship with a loving God. If they were not believers, they are in hell suffering under torment for rejecting God's love and rebelling against him. So any Christian who leaves the New Age and stops practicing the yoga practices, being led by the Spirit and doing the right thing by following the word of God, then they are actually practicing Christianity. They are doing what God wants them to do. The things she mentions, psychic readings and astrology and tarot cards and all those things, they're a contact with the spiritual realm, the realm of darkness, and they are inherently evil, according to what the Bible tells us about evil. So it's contrary to her claim that they are not. What a New Ager calls evil and their problem of evil will not be the same as the Christians because they just don't hold the same worldview. And she goes on to say, quote, the fact that everything and anything can be twisted to the point of toxicity or bent to serve nefarious intentions is precisely why the problem of evil is so compelling, so ever present, so complex, end quote. Okay, so this is interesting. She is saying anything and everything can be evil if you twist it. And that's the thing, twist it. If it's twisted to the point that it's evil, that means you've distorted it from its original purpose or its goodness, because evil is just a privation of good. That means there has to be a standard in place in order for you to know that you have twisted it. For example, again, a C.S. Lewis, example here, he's the one who said that he realized God exists when Lewis made the connection that he knew what a crooked line was, but only because he knew what a straight line was. The straight line was the standard and the crooked line was imperfect in comparison to the standard of a straight line. So she's saying the same thing. She's saying these things are good, but if you twist them, they're not good anymore. She knows the standard. She knows what good is, but how does she know? And what does she attribute that goodness to? She stops short of it. And this is what she says. Sex can either be divine, good, or dark and hateful, which would be evil. Attachment parenting can be manipulative and dysfunctional, evil, or a profound expression of parental devotion, balance, and love, which would be good. Birth can be a pilgrimage, a ceremony, a form of worship, a reverential rite of passage, which would be good, or it can be, and sadly often is, the very apex of satanic ritual and abuse, which would be evil. End quote. Again, what makes these things good and why are they evil when you twist them? Who says when sex is bad or when it is good? Who says when it's good or evil? Who says that it can be twisted? What are the bounds of sex to make it the standard of good, and then anything beyond that standard is now evil? She doesn't say. She says there's a problem when things like sex, birth, parenting, all those things that are considered to be good are twisted outside of that bounds of good. But she doesn't say what the standard is for those things anyways, or who set that standard. She stops short of it because if the universe is God, then how is the universe? Well, first of all, just a side note for those of you who haven't taken apologetics before, the universe has a beginning. If the universe has a beginning, it was created. So a created thing is not eternal, which means it can't be God. There you go. That's why the universe can't be God. But if there is a standard of good, a universal standard of good that puts all of these things within those bounds of the goodness, someone set that standard. That'd be called a moral law. There's a moral lawgiver. Okay, so once again, she sees that there is a problem with evil, but she's never going to find the solution because she's not using God's standards of morality to identify why these things become evil outside of that standard. I hope that makes sense, because that is a basic apologetics argument, and it really does help to defend truth and morality when you're talking to somebody like this, because they make those appeals to the truth and goodness and things like that, but they don't ground them in a moral standard that is unchanging for everybody and is right there in front of their faces. She referred to a new age book by Vadim Zeland. I guess that's how you say his name. And it's called Transurfing, or reality transurfing, or something to that effect. I looked it up, and it is 100% what you'd expect from a new age book. Energy messages to the universe and what the universe gives back to you based upon those messages. So the appeal to the universe as the authority is huge in new age, but they are the ones that control what comes back to them in positive energy, negativity, etc. Because they're, when all is God, then they have that power too, according to their beliefs. And then she ends by saying this, quote, "I find myself continuously saddened and dismayed by the extremism and lack of discernment and wisdom rampant in every realm of human interaction, but also ever hopeful that the general trajectory, the comprehensive arc of human evolution, spiritual evolution, that is upwards," end quote. How do we evolve spiritually? That would be my question. How do we evolve spiritually? People who talk like this are really all over the place and difficult to follow. She throws out a lot of things. Now, maybe if I was more in the new age, I'd be like, oh yeah, I see what she's saying. So maybe her subscribers know what she's talking about. But at least if somebody asks me about Christianity, I can go back to the fundamentals of my faith and say, this explains it. This is what Christ did. This is the human condition. This is why he did it. I don't get from this email any sort of evidence to support all of the claims that she's making. She calls Christians who follow the teachings of Christ and are faithful to him extremists. The real question is, are we? Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me." That's in John 14:6. That means, per the basic laws of logic, the law of the excluded middle says that Jesus is either God or he's not. The law of identity says Jesus is God or Jesus is not God. The law of identity is going to identify who Jesus is. There is no middle option. He's either God or he's not. And if he is God, any other way is false. Any other way brings death. That is pretty extreme. That is an unyielding doctrine of Christianity. That is dogmatic. It is a statement that isolates Christianity in the sense that it makes Christ the only way to heaven. Are we supposed to be flexible when it comes to other religions if Christ is the only way? The universe and Jesus cannot be God. They both can't be. The Bible said there is only one God. So she is correct when she talks about Christianity being extreme. But I would also argue that every other religion is extreme. Buddhism is mostly an atheistic religion. Islam believes Muhammad was the only true prophet of God. No one is neutral. And if they were, she wouldn't have put out a long email about how extreme Christians are, about their beliefs, because she would have let it slide if she was neutral. But she's not. She is the exact thing she accuses Christians of being. And that's just the truth. So that is why we cannot mix New Age and Christianity. If Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, which we believe that he is, because we have good evidence that points to his existence, then yeah, we got to stand on that truth and we don't waver from it. And if we're called dogmatic or we're called, extremists or fundamentalists or whatever, well, then we have to understand people don't know what they're talking about when they say those things. A lot of times they don't even understand what those definitions mean. So I want to close this out today by saying, I know that was a lot, but here's the thing. When we examine other people's beliefs and ideas, it makes us stronger and more knowledgeable in what we believe. It challenges us to think through the accusations. It challenges us to think through the claims. And when we do, we see that in many cases, those who disagree with Christianity are just as extreme and dogmatic. So why do you think some atheists make it their purpose and mission to refute Christianity? If God doesn't exist and we're all material beings, why care? Why create purpose that has to do with God when there is no real purpose if he doesn't exist? It's because they're not neutral. They're extreme. They're dogmatic. They're exactly what they accuse Christians of being. in the end, followers of Christ are going to be accused of being dogmatic, toxic, extreme, all of the above. But if Christianity is true, it's worth taking the insults and being confident in what we believe. I'm really thankful for the listener who sent me this email asking me to make an episode surrounding how we should respond to these types of accusations and claims. We really need to get better at putting ourselves in front of those kinds of claims and accusations so that we can have good conversations about them, because that's what it is to be in the marketplace of ideas. Okay. Now, here's a couple of things that are coming up. The 200th episode is going to be in 2 weeks. I'm going to have giveaways that week, a new sound, a new look, new YouTube, all of the above. There's going to be a great interview where I'm going to be the quote unquote guest, and I'm going to answer your questions. So stay tuned for that, happening very, very quickly. The podcast music is going to be different, and we've been working hard behind the scenes. If you have a episode that you want me to do for you, a question that you want me to answer, go ahead and send it to Shanda, hello@shandafulbright.com. Back it up, Albert. If you have a question for me or you want me to answer something for you on my podcast, go ahead and send it to hello@shandafulbright.com. Even if it's a personal question you want me to answer on the 200th episode, totally down for that. And if you love this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating or review. That is how we get it into the earbuds of others. And I'll catch you on the next one.